California is burning again, but this time it's worse than anything we've ever seen. As of this recording, the 2025 California wildfires have already consumed over 38,000 acres, an area larger than cities like San Francisco or Miami and roughly 3 times the size of Manhattan. That's wild to think about. Entire communities like Pacific Palisades and Malibu are in ashes. Over 12,300 structures have been destroyed, 180,000 people forced out of their homes. AccuWeather's early estimates suggest that the fires could be the nation's costliest ever, topping $250 billion, including what's to come in these next days. But here's a terrifying reality. These numbers are only going to get worse. The fires are still raging with no end in sight. Over the past 2 years, I've seen a steady stream of inquiries from Californians considering a move, but what I've experienced this past week has been eye-opening. Since these wildfires started, the number of calls that I've received from California homeowners has skyrocketed. People aren't just asking questions anymore. They're saying, we're ready to make a decision and take action now. The sheer number of families telling me they're done with the uncertainty, the destruction, and the constant threat of disaster has been astounding. That's why I felt compelled to make this video, not just for those who are calling me, but for anyone who's grappling with this decision and thinking, is it time to leave California for good? Hey, real quick, before we get into everything you came here for, my name's Jonathan and I lead a real estate team here in South Florida. First off, my heart goes out to everyone in California affected by these devastating wildfires. What's happening is absolutely heartbreaking. I just want to acknowledge that before we dive in. All right, with all of that being said, let's just jump right into why you're here. California's wildfires in 2025 have been the most devastating in the state's history. As of today, over 38,000 acres have been burned. That's an area roughly the size of the entire city of Miami, larger than San Francisco, and more than 28,000 football fields combined. To put it another way, it's nearly as big as 85% of Washington, D.C., and almost 1.5 times the size of Disney World. Now, these comparisons help illustrate the staggering scale of destruction that's happening right now. The fires have already claimed at least 24 lives, a number that authorities fear will rise as search and rescue operations continue. Over 12,000 structures, including homes, schools, and businesses, have been reduced to ash. This isn't just affecting small towns or rural areas, it's hitting densely populated neighborhoods in well-known communities like Malibu, Pacific Palisades, Hollywood Hills, and Altadena. The Palisades fire alone has consumed over 20,000 acres, leveling more than 5,300 structures and leaving entire streets unrecognizable. Meanwhile, the Eaton fire in Altadena has scorched over 14,000 acres, forcing thousands to evacuate with little more than the clothes on their backs. These fires have overwhelmed emergency services, displaced thousands of families, and brought entire communities to their knees. Shelters are overflowing with people seeking refuge, while others are left stranded, searching for safe places to stay. Hotels across the region are at full capacity, and Airbnb has stepped in, announcing a program to provide free temporary housing for wildfire victims by partnering with hosts to offer safe spaces during this crisis. The emotional toll is immeasurable as residents grapple with not only the immediate loss of their homes and livelihoods, but also the daunting question of whether it's even worth rebuilding in areas that are increasingly at risk of future disasters. For many, the trauma of these wildfires is compounded by the uncertainty of what comes next, making the recovery process even more challenging. And while the destruction we're seeing is unimaginable, experts warn that this is just the beginning. California's wildfire season is far from over, and with extreme heat, high winds, and dry conditions persisting, the risk of more catastrophic fires is dangerously high. So what does all of this mean for California's future and for the people left picking up the pieces? Let's take a closer look. How did California's wildfires in 2025 become so catastrophic? And it wasn't just bad luck, it was a perfect storm of factors: extreme drought, relentless winds, a strained firefighting system, and a water crisis that exposed cracks in California's infrastructure. Let's go ahead and break it down. First, the Santa Ana winds. These infamous gusts, sometimes called devil winds, were a major driver of the devastation. They reached speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, carrying embers that were miles ahead of the main fire line and turning small flames into raging infernos. Firefighters describe it as trying to stop a wall of fire moving at highway speeds, nearly impossible. And then there's the dryness. California has been gripped by a severe drought for years, and this past winter brought less rainfall than expected. Vegetation that flourished during wetter months dried out completely, creating what experts call the tinderbox. Now, this phenomenon known as weather whiplash is when fluctuating weather patterns from rain to drought amplify fire risks. But perhaps the most shocking failure was the lack of water. In Pacific Palisades, 3 1-million-gallon water tanks which supply hydrants in the area were emptied within hours. Hydrants designed to handle 1 or 2 fires couldn't keep up with hundreds of simultaneous blazes. Crews faced devastating decisions, abandoning entire neighborhoods because they simply couldn't fight the flames without water. The scenes were heartbreaking and raised serious questions about California's preparedness for disasters on this scale. This wasn't just an infrastructure problem, it was a crisis decades in the making. California's aging water systems were not built to handle disasters of this magnitude. Years of droughts have left reservoirs depleted, and with groundwater supplies overused, the state's ability to respond effectively to wildfires has been severely compromised. And as you'd expect, this water crisis has sparked a political firestorm. Critics are blaming state leadership, arguing that environmental policies like those protecting the Delta smell have diverted water away from Southern California. Meanwhile, Governor Gavin Newsom and other officials insist that the hydrant failures were a result of local storage limitations, not water availability statewide. They've called out misinformation, emphasizing that climate change, not policy, is the root of these escalating disasters. And then there are the conspiracy theories, ranging from claims that corporations benefit from these disasters to wild accusations of intentional mismanagement. While these ideas might seem far-fetched, they highlight a growing mistrust in the state's ability to handle crises of this magnitude. All of these factors, high winds, dry conditions, resource failures, and political debates created a perfect storm that turned this wildfire season into one of the worst in California's history, if not the worst. And here's the harsh reality: this isn't a one-off disaster. Experts warn that as climate change intensifies, these kinds of wildfires will only become more frequent and more destructive. The system that's supposed to protect Californians is being stretched to its breaking point. So as we navigate the immediate crisis, the question isn't just how to recover, but how to prevent this from happening again. This year's wildfires aren't just a wake-up call, they're a warning of what's to come. The financial toll of the 2025 California wildfires is nothing short of catastrophic. As of today, damages are estimated at a staggering $50 billion, and that number is definitely expected to rise as the fires rage on. This doesn't just represent destroyed homes or burnt acres, it reflects the deep economic impact on families, businesses, and the state as a whole. Entire communities have been wiped out, and more than 12,000 structures have been destroyed. The direct damage to homes and businesses accounts for billions of dollars, but the indirect costs, like lost wages, disrupted supply chains, and decreased property values, will ripple through California's economy for years to come. Consider the agricultural sector. California produces over a third of the nation's vegetables and 2/3 of its fruits and nuts. With vast farmland scorched, the cost of produce is expected to rise nationwide, putting further strain on the economy. Rebuilding after California's wildfires won't be quick or cheap. Strict regulations, labor shortages, and rising construction costs mean it could take 7 to 10 years. Fireproofing measures alone can increase rebuilding costs by 20 to 50%, and renters in areas like Malibu and Altadena are seeing spiking rents due to limited housing. Governor Newsom is stepping in with an executive order to speed up rebuilding, lifting some regulations and freezing property tax hikes. Mayor Karen Bass is also working with federal leaders, and President Trump may visit soon. Recovery won't be easy, but efforts are underway to help communities rebuild stronger and safer. The financial toll doesn't end with private costs. California's insurance industry is being pushed to the brink. Many insurers have already exited wildfire-prone areas, leaving residents with limited options like the state's FAIR plan, which provides minimal coverage at premium rates. For those with insurance, the process of getting payouts is slow and bureaucratic. Some homeowners may wait up to 2 years or longer for compensation if they're approved at all. And then there's the public sector. Federal disaster aid is critical, but California's budget is already stretched thin by ongoing crises, including housing shortages and drought management. Experts estimate that rebuilding public infrastructure, roads, utilities, schools will cost billions more and take years to complete. The long-term economic ripple effects are just as alarming. Businesses in fire-affected areas face closures or relocations, which means lost jobs and decreased tax revenue for the state. Tourism, a key pillar of California's economy, is also expected to take a hit. Images of smoke-filled skies and burned landscapes aren't exactly enticing for visitors. And then there's migration. With many families choosing to leave California permanently, the state risks losing a portion of its tax base, further complicating recovery efforts. At $50 billion plus in damages and counting, the 2025 wildfires aren't just a natural disaster, they're an economic disaster of unprecedented scale. Recovery won't just take years, it'll take careful planning, immense resources, and a renewed focus on resilience to prevent history from repeating itself. California's homeowners are facing a monumental insurance crisis in the wake of the 2025 wildfires. With over 12,000 structures destroyed and economic damages estimated at more than $50 billion, the insurance system is under immense pressure, leaving homeowners navigating a maze of challenges just to get back on their feet. For those who have lost everything, filing an insurance claim is no easy feat. Homeowners must now wade through weeks or even months of paperwork documenting every item lost in the fire. Claims adjusters, overworked and stretched thin, often push for quick settlements, many times for less than policyholders are entitled to. Even for those lucky enough to have private insurance, surprises are lurking. Policies with vague or unfamiliar language, disputes over coverage limits, and computer-generated claim estimates can lead to payouts that fall short of actual rebuilding cost. And that's just for those who still have insurance. Many Californians no longer have access to private homeowners insurance at all. Major insurers like State Farm and Allstate have been pulling out of wildfire-prone areas for years. In Pacific Palisades, one of the hardest hit regions this year, State Farm dropped 70% of its policies last summer alone, affecting 1,600 homeowners. Those left without private coverage are forced into California's FAIR plan, the state's insurer of last resort, but the FAIR plan policies come with higher premiums, limited coverage, and a payout cap of $3 million per household, far less than the value of many of the homes that were destroyed in affluent areas like Malibu, the Hollywood Hills, Pacific Palisades, and Altadena. The FAIR plan itself is on shaky ground. With more homeowners relying on it, its resources are being stretched to the limits. If losses from this year's wildfires surpass its reserves, the FAIR plan could be forced to draw funding from private insurers operating in California. This in turn could drive even more companies to leave the state entirely. Here's a direct quote from Victoria Roach, who is the FAIR plan president. Quote, "We are one event away from a large assessment. What happens when we're back in fire season if the FAIR plan is already underwater?" This vicious cycle of shrinking private coverage, increased reliance on the FAIR plan, and skyrocketing premiums has left California homeowners in an impossible position. For many, the cost of insuring their homes is becoming just as devastating as the fires themselves. California's Department of Insurance has been scrambling to stabilize the market. Recent reforms aimed at enticing private insurers back into wildfire-prone areas allow companies to pass reinsurance costs onto customers and use catastrophe modeling to justify rate increases. But these changes come at a price. While these reforms may lead to more competitive policies in the long term, they are expected to drive up premiums significantly in the short term, making coverage unaffordable for many Californians. The cost of reinsurance, the coverage insurance companies buy to protect themselves from massive losses, is also driving premiums higher. Critics argue that international reinsurers operate as an unregulated monopoly, dictating rates with little oversight. Insurers, however, insist that rising reinsurance costs reflect the increasing severity and frequency of disasters. This growing reliance on reinsurers has created a volatile system where costs for both insurers and homeowners are spiraling out of control, leaving many Californians unprotected. For those navigating the claims process, consumer advocates warn that vigilance is key. Homeowners should document every interaction with insurance adjusters and carefully review their policies to ensure that they receive fair compensation. Unfortunately, insurance companies often make their profits by holding on to premiums as long as possible and paying out as little as they can. For Californians, the fight for fair compensation has only just begun. With record-breaking profits of $130 billion in 2024, the insurance industry insists that it has resources to pay claims, yet homeowners face an uphill battle to rebuild their lives. As climate change fuels more frequent and intense wildfires, the question remains: how can California create an insurance system that works for everyone? The 2025 wildfires have exposed deep flaws in California's insurance market, forcing homeowners to navigate a complex and often unfair system in the wake of unimaginable loss. And as disaster grows more severe, the stakes couldn't be higher. The devastating wildfires of 2025 are not just reshaping landscapes, they're reshaping lives. With over 150,000 people displaced, these fires are leaving many Californians with the heartbreaking decision. Should they rebuild in areas increasingly vulnerable to wildfires, or relocate to regions with fewer natural disaster risks? As a result of these wildfires, experts predict a significant wave of migration. Many displaced residents are expected to move to states like Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and Florida, seeking stability and safety. This mirrors trends seen after past disasters, where a large percentage of affected residents left their home states permanently. The reasons for this migration are clear. California's wildfire seasons are becoming longer, more severe, and more frequent. Staying in the state means facing repeated risks, rising insurance costs, and the emotional toll of living in constant uncertainty. For many families, relocating isn't just a choice, it's survival. This level of displacement is unprecedented. Following disasters like hurricanes or floods, states like Texas and Florida have seen population shifts, but the scale of California's wildfire-driven migration could redefine communities across the U.S. The ripple effects of these wildfires will stretch far beyond California's borders, reshaping lives, communities, and entire regions. This is more than a local crisis, it's a nationwide challenge. The 2025 Los Angeles wildfires have not only destroyed homes and lives, they've also worsened an already dire housing crisis. Over 150,000 people have been displaced, with more than 12,000 structures destroyed. This catastrophe comes at a time when the city was already facing a severe housing shortage, with 337,000 units needed to meet demand. Displaced families are scrambling to find temporary housing in one of the tightest rental markets in the country. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles is over $2,000, and with thousands of additional people now seeking rentals, prices are expected to surge even higher. This sudden influx of renters will impact the entire region, pushing up costs for tenants who are already struggling to afford housing. Experts warn that even students and lower-income renters may face displacement as wealthier families compete for scarce rental options. For homeowners, rebuilding is a daunting process. Many displaced residents are discovering that their insurance coverage won't fully cover the cost to rebuild. Meanwhile, permitting and labor shortages are expected to delay reconstruction effort for years. In areas like Malibu, it could take 3 to 5 years just to secure a permit, a timeline that could now stretch even longer as thousands of families attempt to rebuild simultaneously. And to make matters worse, construction costs are expected to rise due to increased demand for materials and labor, further inflating housing prices. Many families may be forced to downsize or leave the city altogether. Los Angeles was already facing a housing affordability crisis before the wildfires. The median home price in LA is $1.8 million, and in Pacific Palisades, one of the hardest hit areas, that number jumps up to $3.8 million. With so many homes destroyed, the market will see a significant negative shock to supply, leading to even higher prices for buyers and renters alike. Many of the destroyed neighborhoods were part of what experts call the wildland-urban interface, where natural brush meets urban development. This combination of vegetation and human-built structures makes fires more destructive, as flames can quickly spread from one home to the next. CoreLogic estimates that over 70,000 homes in Los Angeles County are at the highest level of wildfire risk, with a total reconstruction value of $60 billion. As rebuilding begins, many fear it will deepen existing inequalities in the housing market. Wealthier families are more likely to secure insurance payouts and rebuild quickly, while middle and lower income families may struggle to afford higher construction and insurance costs. Experts also warn of a potential increase in homelessness as displaced renters are pushed out of their communities by rising costs. Meanwhile, the region's construction labor shortage, exacerbated by the pandemic, could further delay rebuilding efforts. With fewer contractors available and skyrocketing costs for materials, rebuilding could take years longer than initially expected. The fires have sparked renewed calls for systemic reform to address Los Angeles' housing crisis. Local leaders hope that the urgency of rebuilding will accelerate permitting processes and encourage the development of more affordable housing options. However, these efforts must also address the underlying risks posed by wildfires and climate change. Rebuilding Los Angeles is about more than just replacing what was lost. It's an opportunity to create a more resilient and equitable housing market. But whether the city can rise to meet this challenge remains to be seen. California's 2025 wildfires haven't just displaced tens of thousands of residents, they've also hit some of the most prominent names in Hollywood. The fires that ravaged neighborhoods like Pacific Palisades, Malibu, and Altadena destroyed the homes of many celebrities, raising questions about whether they'll rebuild or move away, and what that means for the future of Hollywood. The list of celebrities who've lost their homes is staggering, reflecting the devastation of these wildfires. Among those that are affected are Tina Knowles, Paris Hilton, Billy Crystal, Ricky Lake, Melissa Rivers, and many more. From sprawling estates to iconic hillside mansions, these homes weren't just properties, they were symbols of the California dream. But now, for many of these celebrities, the dream is on pause, and the future of where they'll call home is uncertain. This is where things get speculative. For all I know, these celebrities might figure out temporary housing while they rebuild in the same location. These neighborhoods are some of the nicest, most expensive real estate in the US, and for many, their connection to the community might outweigh the risk of staying. On the other hand, they could decide that starting over somewhere else makes more sense. Maybe they move to another part of Los Angeles, a different city, or even another state entirely. The toll this type of loss takes on someone is unimaginable, and it will be interesting to see how it all unfolds. In addition to the tremendous loss of personal homes, a number of historic buildings and locations used in television and film have been lost in the fires. These include Palisades Charter High School, a location used in numerous productions, Theater Palisades, a community cornerstone and a venue for countless performances, Will Rogers State Historic Park, a beloved filming location for period dramas and outdoor scenes. These losses cut deeply into Hollywood's history, erasing part of its identity and heritage. For an industry built on iconic places, these losses go beyond personal. This is cultural devastation. If celebrities and high-profile figures start to leave California, it raises an even bigger question. What happens to Hollywood? Over the past decade, there's already been a trend of major productions moving to other states like Georgia, Texas, and New Mexico due to tax incentives and lower risk from natural disasters. Could these wildfires accelerate that shift? With some of Hollywood's most famous neighborhoods now in ruins, the idea of Los Angeles as the epicenter of the entertainment industry may no longer be a given. If more celebrities and production companies relocate, we could see the rise of new cultural hubs in places like Atlanta, Austin, or Miami. These cities already have major productions and offer competitive advantages like lower cost, fewer natural disaster risk, and growing entertainment infrastructure. But even if the heart of Hollywood starts to shift, Los Angeles' identity as the home of the stars won't disappear overnight. The industry may decentralize, but the legacy of Hollywood will still remain. The 2025 wildfires have forced both everyday residents and Hollywood elites to confront tough questions about the future. Will the stars rebuild and stay in California, or will they lead an exodus that reshapes the entertainment industry as we know it? And how does Hollywood move forward without the historic landmarks that have been lost? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the landscape of Hollywood, both literal and figurative, is forever changed. Unfortunately, the 2025 wildfires may not be a once-in-a-lifetime disaster. Climate experts warn that California faces a 70% likelihood of another catastrophic wildfire within the next decade. The combination of extended droughts, rising temperatures, and high winds continues to create the perfect storm for fires to ignite and spread rapidly. The risk isn't going away anytime soon. Over 87% of California is currently experiencing severe drought, leaving vegetation dangerously dry and highly flammable. Add in the infamous Santa Ana winds, which can gust up to 60 miles per hour, and you got a recipe for disaster. These conditions are only worsened by climate change, which has extended California's fire season from a few months to nearly the entire year. And let's not forget, wildfires don't just destroy homes, they destroy infrastructure. Downed power lines, ruptured pipelines, and strained water supplies make firefighting and recovery efforts even more challenging. For many families, the thought of rebuilding after this disaster feels like a gamble. How do you invest so much into a new home knowing there's a high chance it could happen all over again? The emotional and financial toll of losing everything once is devastating. Preparing to lose it again is almost unimaginable. So what's the solution? Experts suggest that rebuilding efforts need to focus on fire-resistant construction, community-wide fire breaks, and better forest management. But these changes take time and massive investments. Meanwhile, residents are left to decide: stay and prepare for the worst, or leave and start fresh elsewhere. The 2025 California wildfires have left a huge mark on the state, its residents, and its iconic neighborhoods. For many, the question isn't just how to recover from this disaster, but whether to stay and face the looming risk of the next one. With experts predicting a 70% likelihood of another catastrophic wildfire within the next decade, rebuilding feels like an emotional and financial gamble. This isn't just about homes, it's about people, communities, and the very identity of California. Will residents choose to rebuild in the same neighborhoods that hold so much history and meaning, or will we see a migration out of these high-risk areas? Will the entertainment industry we associate with Hollywood adapt to these challenges, or could this signal a broader shift in where America's cultural hubs are located? The answers remain uncertain, but one thing is clear: this crisis is a wake-up call, not just for California, but for all of us. It's a reminder of the growing challenges posed by climate change and the urgent need to rethink how we prepare for and respond to these disasters. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching and caring about this important topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you rebuild in California, or would you move on? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share with someone who might find it helpful, and subscribe to the channel for more insights on real estate, community, and life in South Florida and beyond. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue to bring you meaningful content. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.